Hey, folks, and welcome to another episode of Yes and Ask Me, a show based out of Bear Stage here in San Antonio, Texas, where I get to interview some of the most senior level players and exceptional players of the San Antonio improv community. This week, we've been doing Style Week. On Wednesday, I got to be interviewed along with some other panel members by Clint Taylor for dramatic improv style. And today's topic is going to be silly and absurd, and we've got a fantastic panel for you today. My first panel member is my middle square, my center square. Tina Jackson, would you please join us?
They're gonna get so bored of me.
Nobody could ever possibly get bored of you, Tina.
That's not possible. That's not true.
Tina, for anybody who's joining us for the very first time, you are the owner and operator of Bear Stage Improv Theater here in San Antonio. Is that right?
Yes, I am, Rick.
And I just want to say something that I know is that 2020, this year, you've been doing improv for 20 full years, basically.
20 full years in September. So I'm at 19 and a half, I guess.
19 and a half. Excellent. Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, always.
My next guest is Raven Ahrens. Raven, would you please join us?
Hello.
Hey, Raven,
hi, Raven. It's so good to see you.
Yeah.
Hi, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Could you please give us a little bit of background, Raven, on your improv experience?
Yeah. So when I was a senior at UT, I was really looking to get into improv. I've always liked comedy. So I took a class at a theater in Austin, and then I moved to Denton for a little bit. And there wasn't a huge improv scene there. So kind of took a little bit of a hiatus. And then as soon as I got back to San Antonio, I looked back into it and I saw that a little theater called Bear Stage had opened and was doing improv. And I was like, immediately, when can I start? And then I've been doing it since then. So yeah, it's been great. I've loved it.
Yeah, it's been over a year, but like probably a year and a half for you now, right?
Yeah.
At least at Bear.
Yes.
Raven, I've taken classes with you. I've performed with you on stage, and I can't wait to pick your brain about your own personal style. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, for sure.
My next guest is Andrew Hempfling. Please join us.
It's a mouthful, honestly.
Hi.
Andrew, you're another one of the senior level players here in San Antonio. Could you give us some background of your improv experience?
So when I lived in Chicago, I watched a lot of improv, including sometimes being the only audience member. And when I moved here and started taking improv classes, what was that, like 3 years ago? 3-ish? Yeah. So I did that, and now I do Die of the Beholder monthly. Am I missing anything?
And you did at least a year of comedy sports, right?
Oh, yes, that's right. And comedy sports. Yeah. Good times.
You mentioned Die of the Beholder. That's a show that Bear Stage puts on here once. Before quarantine, it was once a month. Are we doing it more often now?
We're starting to do it twice a month now. So
I actually have an example from Die of the Beholder that I want to give later on. But first, I want to start with our actual topic and introduce it. So, silly and absurd. Tina, earlier this week, we talked about long form versus short form. We talked about dramatic improv. Today, we're talking about silly and absurd styles of improv. Describe what this means to somebody who isn't yet familiar with all these different lines in the improv style world.
Well, Webster's Dictionary defines silly. It's silly and absurd. It's probably not like heady and hard to understand. It's really just embracing all of the wacky and weird and silly and absurd things that can happen on stage. Stylistically, it differs a little bit from grounded improv, where it comes to having to obey a sense of maybe gravity is the right word to use. So we're looking at improv that defies some kind of logic, or is more of a caricature drawing of characters, or exists in some sort of ridiculous realm where different rules apply, right? So it's embracing anything that's not like sort of run-of-the-mill normal, and or that's embellishing or exaggerating somehow that normal to create a new normal that's also weird.
So I love that idea, creating a new normal. What I want
I'm
to
pretty expert at it at this point. Welcome to that new normal.
Raven, I want to relate a small story. I remember practicing with you backstage once in the green room at Bear Stage, and we were talking about why we're coming to improv. And I remember you saying, I don't want to play some everyday character. I want to do something crazy like a squirrel wrangler. That's the example that you gave. Like something that's something that doesn't really exist in our world. And I got this impression that you
don't know that.
love to create. Well, that's true. Maybe I got the impression that you want to go up on stage in an improv theater and you want to create that new reality, something that we don't get to experience in our everyday lives. Am I close?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I've wanted to be a squirrel wrangler for a really long time. No, but yeah, that's exactly it. I think that whereas some people kind of, I don't know. I like to do things that are a little bit out of my comfort zone. And I think at the beginning, I kind of stayed safe. And then I realized I had more fun when I was being a squirrel wrangler or, a cowgirl chef or, just like different things that don't exactly, you see every day on the streets. I don't know. I really enjoy that a lot.
I'm gonna push this a little bit further because it's not just the choices of characters that you make. You say and you deliver some of the most absurd lines just out of the blue in scenes. You were doing a scene with Tina and somebody else, and you were three grumpy old ladies, I believe. You know where I'm going with this. Somehow or other, somebody invented a gerbil, I think, that was part of the scene, and you reached over and grabbed it and said, "No, this is my emotional support gerbil." The crowd went wild. It was so out of the blue. The idea that somebody had an emotional support gerbil, an old lady that she carried with her everywhere that she went. These crazy scenes and scenarios that you make on stage are hilarious.
That was actually the first time I performed with Tina, which I was terrified out of my mind because
stop.
I was like, because I had learned from you for so long, so I was like, this is a big deal. Don't mess it up because this is the end of your career.
I had this picture of you on my phone from us sitting backstage, and you're in that whole get up with your hair and the.
That was a very sobering moment for me because I was like, oh, this is how I look old. Like I'm like it's. But yeah, I don't know. I think the way that I kind of get in my head is in the dialogue. I think, okay, the natural thing for me to say would be X, and then my head just kind of spins it quickly, and I'm like, but what if I just deviated from X slightly? What if I, instead of emotional support, like we're living in an apartment together, usually people would have emotional support cats, dogs.
Yeah.
It's gonna be beautiful today. Like that's just kind of how that I try to think what would make my friends laugh and what would make me laugh. And that's kind of how I turn it.
I think you do that so expertly. You're one of my very favorite people to watch on stage. I think that's probably why we don't perform together that often, is because I just want to sit and watch you.
No, but like also I break a lot with you especially, so I feel like it's great.
I got to give another example, and I'm throwing these examples out there because I want people to understand the difference between a dramatic scene where we're talking about, again, something very, very serious, and this silliness. So, Andrew, I remember watching you in the Bear Stage production, Die the Beholder, based off of Dungeons and Dragons, and this was one where I believe you were playing the antagonist, the bad guy. You were the Bone Devil, and somebody reached over and stabbed you or hurt you or killed you, and you begin this minutes-long death scene where you're shaking and making like farting sounds out of your nose, but you don't stop. I've never seen somebody commit to dying so intensely as you. I was in the front row and I could not hold myself together. I was almost falling over my chair, laughing so hard, and you just kept on going. And right when you thought that you were dead, you come back with some more convulsions, and you just keep on going. What was going through your mind in that moment?
So, thank you. What was going through my mind? Well, okay, so whenever I step on stage with people, I'm mostly trying to fuck with the people that I'm on stage with. I think that's as far as I can remember. Anytime I'm going on stage, I want to make the people with me laugh and work with them, obviously. And I think I actually have a tendency to like steamroll a little bit. But what was going through my head? I don't know. And I just kind of like relentlessly just like whatever's making people laugh, just like smash in their face. Like, don't stop making them laugh. And then, I don't know, stop after a little while.
I think what Raven said and what Andrew said are both really good tools to use when you're like trying to be a little bit more absurd or like lean into that style a little bit more. And one is like deviate slightly from what's normal to make it absurd. And then what Andrew said is do something like a lot. Like if it's funny, do it more, right? So ramp it up, accelerate it, heighten it. And so for him, it was turning that death into way too long a death scene. I'll say it from somebody who was likely on stage with you at the time that happened. It's happened so many times. It's like that memory specifically fades for me. But I have watched Andrew do so many death scenes.
I grew up watching Looney Tunes and like Jackie Chan, and there's like I didn't watch a lot of like things where people just talk. Growing up, there's a lot of like explosions and like weird exaggerations. So that's my thing, is like crazy physicality.
I think for sure that's one of the places that you would. I think nobody who's ever seen you on stage would argue that you don't use your entire body when you're like sinking into your characters. I think Raven, typically she goes like voices and accents and character like posture and stuff, but you go like full body all out, hanging off the walls, being a monkey. And I think both of them are different kinds of absurd that make this like real fun.
I gotta gush for 1 second, Raven. The first time I ever saw you was in the Halloween show.
Oh yeah.
And I was all the way in the back. I didn't even, because like usually I'm at least familiar with the people who are in like one of the recurring shows. And halfway through I was like, who is that? She's ridiculous. Oh man, it was amazing.
Really? That's really nice. Thank you.
I think I don't know if this is the exact episode the show you were talking about. Because that show was called Camp Slaughter. It ran for several weeks on Halloween last year. And Raven, one of those shows was where you were the assistant to the camp director. And whatever the camp director had a desk. You had a tiny desk. And the camp director had like a computer, and you had like a tiny computer, and you carried that little desk with you everywhere that you went. And it was so visual and so crazy on scene. It was hilarious. Okay, so what was that, Raven?
Thank you. Yeah. A lot of times.
So Raven,
this is just going to turn into like us ego stroking like these totally absurd moments, because they're so memorable. I think one of the things that's true about them is like, I think a really grounded scene you can be really moved by. And like we talked about on Wednesday with Falky, is she was really moved by a scene that she'd seen and she remembers 3 years later. But I think there are these like really physical moments and these really big characters. I'm remembering another one another Raven moment where she played Judy Garland, and she just comes in and she was like, did somebody say pills? And like disappears again. And and it's just like, these are really, really memorable moments that stand out as being like, I mean, they're certainly really funny, but they're also, you know, I think the challenge is, and maybe you guys can speak to it a little bit, is how to embrace some of this silly and you know, I think the challenge is sometimes bringing people with you, and not running over somebody else's idea, because those choices can be so loud sometimes. But how do you make sure that you're still being a good scene partner, I think is maybe a good question to ask, because I find trouble with that sometimes myself.
I've been a bad scene partner a lot. I'm probably even less than I think. So I don't know. I think a lot of it is just trying to be a little more mindful of what else is going on, because I'm sure I've steamrolled a lot of scenes in the interest of being a little too wacky.
But so Andrew, what I'm going to say about that is that in the show Diet Beholder, you're not one of the 4 main characters. You're always playing a supporting role in that show. So I feel like your position in these scenes is typically as somebody that adds that that comedic humor to the scene, and that while adding humor to the scene, you're actually supporting your characters. Is that how you feel?
Oh, thank you. So yeah, there's 4 of us backstage. Raven's also there.
She's new.
So that's another thing where I've gotten notes, you know, months ago, weeks ago, and every so often that I'm taking a little too much information or too much attention as the bad guy. So a lot of it is being mindful of the whole show of like, let's have someone else do it, because especially the bad guys of that show, man, everybody is so ridiculous. And sometimes I almost feel like, I hope I'm ridiculous enough. It's just, I think another thing that helps with it is I absolutely love laughing at the people that I'm working with. Like just now when you mentioned the tiny desk, I think if I'm saying to myself, wow, that is so stupid, I'm going to love it. I love stupid things.
Right. And it's not everybody else's style, right? Like some people really love and gravitate toward this style, and some people are like, ugh, it's so lowbrow. And I'm like, laughter is laughter. Do you like it? But that's why it's Style Week, because it's not everybody's style to do grounded relationship-based comedy all the time. Sometimes the weird and the wacky is like we talked about, squirrel wrangling's a little bit more fun than being a doctor. So I like going through all these. I want to also acknowledge that Twitch just lit up when you said that Andrew was not a main character. They're like, excuse me, he's great. I was like, no, we get it. He's great.
I'm so sorry.
No, Twitch is like offended.
I get to pick my own characters all the time.
It's true. Yeah, but we added Raven to that show because she, as she was coming up through classes, we were like, this is a character actor, and we need character actors to be all these like all the NPCs in that show. So she's newer to the show, but she's doing the same role as Andrew now.
So exciting!
And busted down the door.
Very
what?
hard. It's hard to do. I mean, like, because like you said, all of these characters are such big actors, big character actors, which makes them so fun. But I'm like, oh, gotta hype it up, because I'm like, you know, gotta stay up there with them. So it's been such a fun time and fun challenge to get to do it. So it's been a blast.
So since we're on the topic of being wacky and silly and crazy and absurd, but still supporting the characters that you're there with, or the other players that you're playing with, Raven, you're in a team together with me. It's a quad. There's 4 of us in that team. It's called DeLorean, and I put you in that team. I chose you because of your craziness and wackiness, but because of your other skills as well. How do you feel that you balance an equal part team. In other words, you're not a side player. You don't just come in, add wackiness and leave. How do you balance adding wackiness and craziness, but also developing your actual character over 20 minutes?
So I think that comes with just like time doing more improv. I feel like when I first started, I felt like I have this great idea. It's coming from this certain thing I know about pop culture that I think the audience will like in this moment, or I think that will resonate because of X, Y, or Z. And then honing in on, okay, this person just told me something very serious. Maybe I should like respond to that. And like not be like an egocentric muffin man. Like, like just like maybe the term in like improv is like pass the fork. Someone says pass the fork, just do it. You don't have to be like, yeah, I'm passing the fork. That will come with the character, but like respond to what's in front of you. And I think the scene is so much more smooth as you go along. So I don't know. I think once I learned that, and it kind of hit me hard, like I got a really good note in class once from Lex, and I was like, oh yeah, I do that. I think I was more cognizant of it, and it really helps you as a player and helps your team, because it almost feels like it's a no when you're telling them, maybe not no, but I have this big character idea and I'm not going to listen to what you're saying. It's like a sorry, but so yeah.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
I think one of the things that Kevin McCormick mentioned when we were talking about Head, Heart, and X players several weeks ago is when he's doing a big character, sometimes he will come in with that nugget of like something beforehand that's like, I'm going to be this, or I'm going to have something that he's bringing on stage with him, and then finding a way to like justify and like marry that with what's actually happening in the scene is like another really fun, silly way to like justify, like, or to add some absurdity as like these things, like what's happening in the scene and what I thought of beforehand don't really mix, but now they have to, and figuring out a way that those things interact together I think can be really fun. But watching absurdity unfold on stage, I think sometimes I think shows that are purely silly and God, I can't think of the name of it. It was called Midlife. I can. Midlife Crisis was a show in Chicago that was Craig Euler and somebody. Oh, kill me for my improv references. But it was a duo that was like purely silly. It was so silly that like by the end my guts hurt. I was exhausted. I couldn't tell you a single scene that happened in a single show because it all went so fast, and it was such an onslaught of like ridiculousness, but I laughed so hard. And then so I think that can be really exhausting. I can't imagine playing a show like that because it's so much energy that you have to put into it. But then but the idea of like infusing silliness and absurdity into more of your scene work and stuff is something that I think is really a great tool to have in that tool belt, is to just slightly embellish or to heighten or to like just crank the knob up to 11 occasionally, on an emotion, even because sometimes that's like absurdity too, is like reacting at an 11 to something that deserves like a level 4 or 5 reaction, is react big on something small and like just see where your scene goes, because it'll infuse like a whole new meaning to like, why would somebody be that upset? Why would somebody be that upset about something this small? And it adds character motivation and stuff too. So there's so much silliness to be had.
So I want to underscore that idea right there, that you don't have to bring the silliness with you prepared, that silliness can be whatever reaction you happen to have to whatever somebody just said. And I gave examples for Raven and for Andrew, and now Tina, it's your turn. I remember a scene where you were with Clint Taylor, and this is one where you guys just accidentally stepped into it, and the both of you just kept yes-anding each other straight through the scene. I can't remember why you were together in the scene, but for some reason, I think Clint was some sort of like sailor or ship captain, and you were there, and you had minutes. There was a while where you developed your characters, and it wasn't a particularly absurd scene up to this point.
I think
But
we
then-
were enemies, if I remember
That
correctly.
was Clint actually misheard you and thought that you said that you were with child.
I wasn't.
Uh,
I did this.
But you were.
It isn't what
and
I
then-
said. Yeah.
And then you start to die or something. Something happens where you're dying, but he thinks that you're with a child, so he grabs like an elephant, not an elephant, like a
Yeah, let me take over here. We were dueling. Because we were enemies, we were dueling, and he killed me. He thought I said something about being with child, and I was not, but I was dying. And now he thinks I'm dying with a child, and he says, "I will save your child." He grabs a swordfish out of the ocean and uses it to give me a C-section. Where he
trained?
realized, huh?
Was he trained? Was his character?
No, he was a sailor. He was a sailor. He used a swordfish, cuts me open, realizes I'm not pregnant, then uses the needle of the swordfish, snaps it off, and uses it to sew me back up, even though I'm already dying. It's been established that I'm dying. Yeah, so that was one where I was caught. I mean, that was not even my absurdity. That was me riding the wave of Clint's absurdity. Clint, if you're on this thread, you're ridiculous.
What I found fantastic about that scene was that Clint realized early on that he made a mistake, but he kept on digging into it. And I think, Andrew, you hinted at that that's a great way to be absurd. Just hit that thing over and over and over again. And Tina, you kept saying, no,
I'm not.
I'm not. No.
And that's not, to be clear, we like to say yes, and saying no in that moment isn't a denial. It was purely that our characters were miscommunicating, and we both had to lean into that harder. He was going to go harder to save my unborn child, and I had to go harder with, no, you don't have to do that. There is no child. And that's what heightens and explores like this more ridiculous. So he had to get more ridiculous as I denied harder.
I think a big part of it is staying committed, and it's the same with any improv. Is you commit,
Commitment, yeah.
and if you're unwavering in it, then it stays strong.
For sure.
I love it too when scenes have the occasional ability to make the absurd a new normal, right? Like to have a scene exist in some fantasy realm or some weird place, but like this is what's normal here. Andrew, do you want to speak on unicorns?
Oh, snap. I would like to, but I think you're better at it. I'll start and just take it away whenever I start rambling. So this is one of my favorite characters ever that has never seen the light of day. It was just in a rehearsal. And it was for Die of the Beholder, where Noomsock the Barbarian and what's his name, Pocket, the half guy cleric.
It's like you've been in this show for.
And I was a single mom. So it started with Clint and it was Clint and Louie, and they were just like they just started marching in a circle, like round and around, and then one of them just said, "Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy." So I come in as their single mom, who's a unicorn, exhausted, and it's an absurd situation, but we got these two kids running around in circles saying, "Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy," and I'm just playing exhausted single mom, like, kids, pizza's ready.
Right, but the idea was, like to put like a more grounded scene than is typically in Die of the Beholder, honestly, in this fantasy world of like, he didn't have to do anything like super abnormal, but the fact that they were all unicorns made it weird, arguably weird. And then he grounded it by just picking a character of like a normal exhausted single mom. But by placing those two together and juxtaposing them, it made that absurd world very real, because now people are empathizing and relating to a single unicorn mom, rather than just like living in a fairy world. It was like a really great weird juxtaposition, and that scene will never see the light of day, and that's too bad, too damn bad.
Yeah, you definitely.
Oh, go on.
You definitely need your foothold somewhere that's relatable. Otherwise, it's not going to make any sense if you just be crazy with it, I think.
For my last question, for dramatic players like me that can sit in a full scene and just go really deep dark for 20 minutes, we often say that being in that zone is really cathartic. Do you guys feel that being up on stage and being absolutely absurd, is that cathartic for you? And it's okay if the answer is no.
Yeah, what do you get out of it? Why do you prefer the silly style?
I have an extreme yes.
Yeah, hard yes. Like the hardest yes.
Yes.
Yeah. You go first, Andrew.
Oh, I was going, go ahead. I think there have been times when I've felt it being very, like, almost on the border of bullying. Like, there was this time when I was the Grinch, and Rick, you were in the scene. You were standing next to me. You were the bailiff. And
please give no more details about the show. I want everyone to wonder what the fuck this show was.
Yeah. No, but I have to say at least what happened where Rick, you were standing next to me, and I said something like, are you going to hit me with your stick? You're going to stick me with your stick, sticky boy? And I could tell that you wanted it to stop, but I wasn't. It's almost like tickle torture, kind of.
Oh, tickle torture is a really good example.
Hey! That's what I like. And then I also like, there was this one time when Louis put on this like general's wig, and he was supposed to be like this like army captain or something, and all he did was just walk past me with a straight face, and I started cracking up, and he just went back the other way, and he was just relentlessly deadpan. I can't explain it in any other way. It was just like the relentlessness of it is catharsis.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that 100%. I also feel like when I first got into improv, I was like, I like to perform and I like to make other people laugh. And then the more I did it, I was like, oh, I get to laugh like 100% of the time when I'm doing this. I mean, and if you play with me, you know that like I break notoriously, and it's like my worst habit and I hate it so much, but I have so much fun. And so I feel like, you know, I have a job that's pretty serious. Luckily I have great coworkers, but like it's a job that like I have a straight face on all day. I'm working with I'm working in a hospital, so it's like people are sick, you know? And so when I get on stage and I get to be around people that are making me laugh all day, it's so fun and it's so cathartic. And so I steer clear usually of those serious scenes because I'm like, I'm here to laugh because I've been like serious all day and I want to just like leave with like my abs. Like I don't need ab ripper X. Like this improv is that. Like that's why I have a firm six-pack. Yeah.
I can't see it, but me too.
No, I don't have that at all.
It's a laugh pack. I've got a laugh pack right here.
A laugh pack. Firm laugh pack.
Yeah, I got a laugh pack.
Hey Tina, you do dramatic, you do silly and absurd, and you do everything in between. Do you find one more cathartic than the other one?
No, I mean I like them both like terribly equally. I think I'm a more dramatic actor generally. I think that's where I generally gravitated toward, was like the acting part of it and the grounded improv. But as I think I've gotten better and more comfortable with it, I've been more comfortable, like Raven said earlier, to sort of leave my comfort zone and step into a silly voice and then figure out what the fuck it means later.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I think I've become more of a silly improviser, and I like the range of it because I think it really broadens how good you feel afterwards is like
Yeah.
by building both skill sets. So I truly love both, because at the end of like a really dramatic show, I come away feeling like, oh my God, I did some really good work out there. Like I'm proud of myself. And the silly shows, I come out afterwards and I'm high-fiving and I'm laughing, I'm crying about something. And I'm like, Raven, the fucking Judy Garland you did like blew my, like I think I'm more excited about, I've got more adrenaline after a silly show, but like I'm also really proud of myself after a more dramatic show.
And like I like to watch dramatic improv, like, and I love dramatic things in general. I just haven't, tiptoed into them waters yet.
That's a different one.
There's plenty of time for that. Guys, I have to admit, I'm really surprised about something. Part of me was so afraid that when I asked you all about your silliness and absurdity, you were all going to be like, yeah, well, I mean, that's just who I am. It's just fun to be who I am. That's just, it's just natural. But I love hearing how, how heady you guys are about these silly choices, and how self-aware you are about what you're doing on stage. I thought that was fantastic. Actually, I learned about that during the show. Yeah. Folks, I think this is the end of our show.
Yeah.
I know. It goes by so fast, especially when you're crying, laughing so hard that you're crying.
This
folks,
one turned into a fun memory show where we did a lot of examples. A lot of silly examples.
And by the way, those are memories that I think about every now and then. And that's actually, you know what? Let me end on that. When I watch you guys perform and I see something that's so incredibly funny, it gets burned in my memory, like Tina said earlier. And in the middle of the day when I'm at work in front of my computer, I'll remember that stuff. The Tina being cut open, Andrew, you dying over and over and over again, and Raven, you and your emotional support gerbil. These things, those events happened months and months ago, and I still think about them. Thank you for those performances. Andrew, thank you for joining us today. You were a fantastic guest. Thank you for those stories. Raven, thank you for all of your insight. Much appreciated. And Tina, thank you again for joining us. My middle square, thank you for your support. I genuinely appreciate it.
Always.
For all of our Twitch users, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad that you're able to watch this live with us. That feels great to have some fans on there. Now, for anybody that has not had their fill of improv today, on this same Twitch channel, Bear Stage is going to debut one of our very first shows, or a show for the very first time, called Tic Tac Toe. It's going to happen today on this channel at 8 o'clock, right now, 8 o'clock Texas time, Central Time, if you happen to be in a different time zone. So please go take a break, go get some food, and then come back at 8 o'clock and watch us. I also want to say, like Clint said yesterday, things are bananas in this world right now. Absolute bananas. If you enjoyed what you saw today, if you're a total veteran of improv, or you just want to learn more about improv, go online, do some research, find a local improv theater. Improv theaters are hurting real bad right now during quarantine. Find a way to support them. Bookmark them. Definitely go visit them after quarantine. And if you want to support them, I'm sure they'll have a donate button on their website. If you're in San Antonio, bearstage.com has a donate button right on the homepage. If there's something that you can do to support us, please take a moment and do so. Thank you all again for joining us. Oh, and one more thing. Next week, we're going to have 3 whole new shows, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, same time, 6 o'clock. Our shows for next week are going to be audience integration, creating a show, which will be really, really helpful for anybody who wants to do their own online stuff right now, and acting, just being a good actor on stage. I hope you join us next week. Thank you all for being here tonight. Have a great night.